I'm sure that has occurred to you as what's it going to look like when we get on the other side of the pandemic? What is life going to be like? We've understood that normal will not be normal. Whatever was normal will not be the new normal. But what can we learn from the Babylonian exile? A fascinating question, actually. In 587, the Babylonian Empire had become the big dog in the Middle East and Mesopotamia. Their empire would include all and more of the previously powerful Assyrian Empire. And if you remember your Old Testament history, that's all review. It's good for us to remember that the Assyrians had taken Samaria, the northern kingdom of Israel, in 722. They had wiped it out, really, but they could. The Assyrians didn't mess with Jerusalem. They played around with it a little bit, but Jerusalem paid them off well, and so and the Assyrians could still get from the northern part, the Mesopotamian, what we might call Asia Minor, down to Egypt. Egypt had a lot of riches, and along that Nile River Valley, and so that was the goal, is just to have safe passage along the Mediterranean Sea on the coastal plain highways and that sort of thing. Well, then the Babylonians were the next powerful empires, come and go, as is the tendency. So Babylonia, it took what was Assyria and then enlarged it as they went on. And you can tell by the comparison map, the Babylonians took all of the Assyrian Empire and expanded it all the way north to the Black and Caspian Seas and farther into the Arabian Peninsula and down the Nile farther. Now, the Assyrians and Babylonians had similar means of controlling the far lands of their empire. And so they would dilute the native populations by removing some of the people of that native area and then switching and exchanging for people in other parts of their conquered kingdoms. And on this one, you see that the red line going from Babylonia into Samaria and then the other lines, Samaria and Israel, and then the other lines are Exodus lines, we could say, taking people out of Israel. Now, of course, that does a variety of things. Number one, it does dilute the population, and you might remember that Samaritans were not fondly thought of in the time of Jesus and before. And one of the reasons for that is because as people came in, were transported in after these conflicts and in this process of diluting populations. One of the things that was diluted is the religion of the area. And so people would bring their faiths and their practices into Israel, but the Jews also spread theirs to wherever they went. And what happened then is Samaria not only violated Jerusalem by starting their own temple worship up in Samaria, but they also diluted the Jewish blood by intermarriage and such things as that. Now, eventually, Jeremiah is the prophet that gives us the best timeline for the Babylonian era. And it says this in Jeremiah: in the 9th year, the 10th month of Judah's king Zedekiah, Babylon's king Nebuchadnezzar and his entire army came against Jerusalem and surrounded it. In the 11th year of Zedekiah, on the 9th day of the 4th month, they broke through the city walls. Now, the Assyrians didn't care about Jerusalem. They didn't need it. But I don't know what it was, whether it was just the pride of having defeated Jerusalem, or if they wanted the riches of the temple and the town. The Babylonians had a passion for that. It took them well over a year, to before Jerusalem fell. They took the fine furnishings of the temple before destroying it. This is an artist's rendition of the city walls, which was a huge embarrassment for any town. The city walls are broken down, the temple is destroyed, the people are leaving, and I don't know if you can tell on the picture or not, but seemingly some Babylonian soldiers are guiding the process. So that was that's what happened at that point in time. They left. The rulers and the leaders were the ones that were shipped out of Jerusalem. Now, Jeremiah provided some advice for the exiles in Babylon. It may have been, I believe, rather surprising advice for those who were shipped away to Babylon. And Roger's going to tell us about Jeremiah's take on that.
The prophet Jeremiah sent a letter from Jerusalem to the few surviving elders among the exiles, to the priests and the prophets, and to all the people that Nebuchadnezzar had taken to Babylon from Jerusalem. The Lord of heavenly forces, the God of Israel, proclaims to all the exiles that I have carried off from Jerusalem to Babylon. He proclaims, build houses and settle down, cultivate gardens and eat what they produce. Get married and have children. Then help your sons find wives and your daughters find husbands in order that they too may have children. Increase in number so that you don't dwindle away. Promote the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it because your future depends on its welfare.
Now that's rather fascinating, isn't it? Your welfare depends on the city where I have sent, the welfare of the city where I have sent you. And so, there was a problem, however, that the exiles encountered. Their religious practice had been temple-centered, and especially for the people who had been trucked out of Jerusalem, their worship was really temple-centered, but all of Judaism made trips to the temple because that was where God, and I'm going to put it this way, that's where God lived. And so it was a little bit of an issue that amazing temple edifice was destroyed. And that was their deepest connection with God. Now not only was the temple destroyed, but it's been ransacked. There's nothing of value left, and the people are far from it anyway. It was an amazing piece of architecture, actually, in its day, and would be even today. And many, and then, of course, it was rebuilt, and then it was destroyed again by the Romans in the uprising of 66 to 70 A.D. But the problem for the exiles was that they needed to come up with a new way of worshiping without the temple. Their lament, and I invite you to read this psalm on your own, and perhaps this week it could be your psalm as well in this season of COVID-19. Their lament is expressed in Psalm 137. And I'm not sure that we have the slide. We don't. Psalm 137. I'm going to read it with a response. And if you catch on to the response, you can mumble it under your mask. How can... You know, Tom, did I give you the music for that? Yeah. Okay, let's do this. How can we sing the Lord's song here on foreign soil? How can we sing? And that was their prayer. And here's Psalm 137. Alongside Babylon's streams, there we sat down, crying, because we remembered Zion. We hung our lyres up in the trees there because that's where our captors asked us to sing. Our tormentors requested songs of joy. Sing to us a song of Zion, they said. And we'll sing the response. How can we sing the Lord's song here on foreign soil? How can we sing? But how could we possibly sing the Lord's song on foreign soil? Jerusalem, if I forget you, let my strong hand wither. Let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I don't remember you. If I don't make Jerusalem my greatest joy. And we'll sing. How can we sing the Lord's song here on foreign soil? How can we sing? Lord, remember what the Edomites did on Jerusalem's dark day. Rip it down, all the way to its foundations, they yelled. Okay, let's sing. How can we sing the Lord's song here on foreign soil? How can we sing? Daughter Babylon, you destroyer, a blessing on the one who pays you back the very deed you did to us. A blessing on the one who seizes your children and smashes them against a rock. Let's sing. How can we sing the Lord's song here on foreign soil? How can we sing? I bet you've never prayed that prayer toward somebody who has done you wrong. Blessed will the one be who takes your children and smashes them against the rock. That's how deep their pain was about being removed from the temple and forced to be in this foreign land. This was not just a move. This is not just a change of house. This was devastating to them. Reading that psalm leaves no doubt of their spiritual and emotional despair. It would also have presented real theological issues because there was a belief in that special presence of God in the temple. Yet, from those dispersions of the Jews to different parts of not only the Assyrian but then the Babylonian Empire came new life and new hope. In fact, that new life and new hope would lead them to a brand new understanding of God and worship and prayer. From the 16th century, we have this piece of information as recorded in the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. The author writes this: I would surmise that synagogues were first initiated in the Babylonian exile for the purpose that those who have been deprived of the temple where they used to pray and teach would have a certain place similar to the temple, in which they could assemble and perform the same kind of service. The same did other Jews in the dispersion, be it in Asia or Egypt or Europe. After the return from Babylon, the restoration of the Temple of Jerusalem, the Jews still retained the well-established institution of the synagogue. While some scholars of the subject place the wide establishment of the synagogues later during the Persian period, which, again, if you remember your Old Testament stories, the Persians, when they defeated the Babylonians, now that's the next new empire, as empires come and go, they said, go home. Go home to all these people that had been dispersed by the Assyrians and Babylonians. But they had taken roots, as Jeremiah had told them to do, and so some determined with the synagogue worship, that actually they could continue their lives where they were. There was no need to go home. They were in a new home. So effectively, what the Assyrian and Babylonian dispersions did was they made Judaism a world religion. The very thing that they were trying to undercut and put down became more widespread. And when you think about how widely the Germans had to go, how widely the Germans had to go to get rid of the Jews, the Assyrians and Babylonians did a pretty good job, wouldn't you say? They were all over. And it is very much a world religion. There's a way of looking at things that our last worship service in here before the COVID was about March 16th, I believe. And we lost our temple on the 17th. We were out of here for 19 weeks. We had to find new ways of worshiping because it was not cool to be even in a group this size, even dispersed and separated and distanced like you are, thank you, wearing masks and all of that, because we want to do this again next week, of course, so I appreciate your passion for that. But we lost our temple, and in the meantime then, what could have been devastated made even some old dogs try some new tricks and do some new things and try some different manners of worship and to spread it out. And so even now we have the people on live stream that'll still be there even after we can gather and after there's a vaccine and all of this stuff. The church will not be the same. Worship will not return to the way it was. We will need to make friends with this new world, a world in which evangelism, spreading the good news, the evangelion, takes on a different form. And while it is not easy, and while we have different parameters and we can't measure it like we could when we had bodies in one house, it sure worked for Judaism. And it works to this day. Shall we deny, regret, or doubt that God is in the process of doing similar work today as God did with the Jews in the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian periods? That's not easy. And it's way different than any of us would probably like. We after all, do have an incarnational Christianity. Jesus Christ became God and moved in among us and became part of us and was hungry and thirsty and pain and joy and all of those things and slapped the flesh with people and had a great time with parties and cried with others, and that's us. That's our faith. We are incarnational, and we in the model of Christ are called to be with one another, and yet now it's going to have to take a different form, even though it's not going to be easy and it will take much adjustment. But our God is also one that surprises us pretty consistently. I mean, after all, what's Easter about? God doing a new thing against all odds. And so we call ourselves resurrection people. And so may we be resurrection people. And may our prayer be, Lord, we want to be in what you're doing and what you're going to make of this, even this. Amen. Yeah, we will not go back to normal.